Man, I had some low expectations, but what is this? Hi there everyone, welcome back to On the Flip Side. My name is Adam Shawwalker, your host, and today we're going to be checking out this new album from nu metal legends Slipknot. I don't think anyone can argue the massive influence that Slipknot have had on metal as a whole. And I've never been the biggest Slipknot fan, but credit where it's due, Iowa is a really great record, and I played Guitar Hero 3 before I forget was pretty good. But in all seriousness, while Slipknot was never a band that I listened to consistently, there are some excellent cuts from these guys, and while most of these angst-heavy, hyper-aggressive tracks have somehow aged worse than most Limp Bizkit songs, they have an undeniable place as one of the biggest metal bands on Earth. But even with that status, Slipknot, like every other late 90s metal or nu metal band, has been going through a bit of an identity crisis. I'd say that you could argue that a lot of that started on The Grey Chapter, a solid record for sure, but you could kind of tell that that was the end of the ideas. 2019's We Are Not Your Kind was when that became more apparent than it had ever been before. There's tons of tracks on that record that just feel like they're doing a quick rinse and repeat of the previous record, which from a monetary standpoint, I get. The Grey Chapter was a pretty big, pretty massive comeback album after 6 years of being away, so I get the urge to kind of just run it again, but it's a really obvious move. Now what it seems the response to this problem is the end so far, which admittedly does change some things up and has some pretty bold risks. Some of those risks do pan out better than others, and I do credit them for trying. Like the first track, Adderall, which to me sounds like Corey Taylor was listening to With Teeth by Nine Inch Nails and was like, yeah, let's just do that. And I know that sounds like a little bit of a stretch, but seriously, that song is like on the same wavelength as that record. And I actually do end up liking it to a certain extent. Corey Taylor's vocals are pretty decent on this track, not too obnoxious, but you can kind of tell that he's trying to like maybe hold back his Stone Sour delivery a little bit and not doing the best job at keeping it like under control. But while I can appreciate some of it, there's just as much of this material, if not more, that just completely misses the mark. Like Acidic, which sounds like an attempt at trying to put together a grunge track, like if they were trying to congeal every popular grunge record into one amorphous blob and just kind of pass it off as a good song. The production on this track in particular is pretty awful, especially on the vocal side of things. There's weird touches of auto-tune paired with an echo or like maybe a delay that I think is supposed to be like an ominous sounding addition, but ends up sounding like someone was messing with some effects presets and just forgot to turn them off after saving the track. And those are the more extreme examples where I think things just kind of lose focus or at least push far one way or the other. And the unfortunate thing is that while there is experimentation here, there's also plenty of tracks that either double down on the modern anthemic chorus style that Slipknot has been running with, or they're just ripping from their peers. Like Heirloom sounds like a fucking Avenged Sevenfold track, and frankly it's embarrassing. Past the DJ work on the turntables and some of the percussion, there's really not much to me that jumps out and indicates that this is a Slipknot track. Like, it's as if Avenged Sevenfold and Disturbed shit out a song and threw a cheap Halloween store mask on it and just called it a day. It's like Slipknot in the process of trying to branch out but hesitating to actually make exceptional and truly bold moves, have put out some half-baked attempts at experimentation, and on the songs where they try to recapture what made the band so memorable and so good in the first place, they accidentally put together some of the blandest in one ear and out the other drivel that I've ever heard. The end so far from a writing and production standpoint is very similar to British food in that it lacks seasoning and it's utterly depressing because you think of all of the things that it's been closely related to and you wonder how all of the curry in the world didn't even leave a dent in the concept of beans on toast. You guys fucking owned India and didn't even capitalize on curry. Anyway, dumb tangent aside, here's my thoughts on the rest of the tracks that I haven't mentioned yet. The Dying song, Time to Sing, as a song title is already an indicator of what they're trying to go for here. It's a half-baked call and response track to hype the audience up, and admittedly, the driving beat for the first part of this song is pretty great, but it still sounds like a lot of the other older hype-up Slipknot tracks. Not a lot that's new here ends up being very good. The whole chant of die, 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 then just a bunch of laughter is pretty played out. I just don't really care for this track. It's fairly low-hanging fruit. The Chapeltown Rag does that stupid low-tone spoken word thing like right at the beginning of the track that leads into this like mid-2000s Linkin Park flow on the lyrics that falls apart halfway through the verse for some decent throat-shredding vocals. But just when it feels like it's maybe going somewhere or committing to being a heavy track, it breaks into Corey Taylor basically doing Stone Sour again. Yen is a massively underwhelming track with this long intro that leads into this frankly embarrassingly melodramatic crooning. Actually, yeah, I'm going with embarrassing for this track. I can't really decide if it's a ballad or if it wants to be like an anthem. It's got some weird goth vibes at parts, but it's like someone who doesn't know metal or goth or anything about alternative music saw a picture of Peter Steele, and this is the type of music that they would assume he would make. And God, the fucking lyrics, man, as the knife goes in, cut across my skin, know that I would die for you. Shut up, please, just stop. Hive Mind is probably the only track on the album that from front to back feels mostly solid all the way through. I do wish the intro was maybe cut down a little bit because it doesn't really add much, but I can at least appreciate that they actually do kind of land this thing as a heavier song, and it does end up being a bit more in line with some of their better material. The chorus still sucks though, but at least it's not too chorus heavy of a track anyway. Warranty feels like the last track, but they've become kind of too self-aware for this song to end up being anything but like silly, with "Isn't This What You Came Here For" being the leading lyric from this song. It's not awful, but it's certainly not outstanding either. Medicine for the Dead is a bit of a slow burn. I do like a lot of the guitar work here. It's fairly well put together on that end. Corey Taylor's clean vocals, honestly, are the worst thing about this track. Past that, there's moments on this song and things that I like that come together and end up feeling a little bit mismatched at points. Like the transitions from the clean passages to the heavier spots on this track are just not very clean. This is definitely the closest that they get to a good song that is still pretty bad. Hell is another of these tracks that feels like very low-hanging fruit. The intro drums and guitar work feel like a rip on Raining Blood. The chanting vocals at this point are predictable. Corey Taylor is spitting out more very fast, sharp lines that are fine. There are moments on this album where I'm reminded that not one, but two people are labeled as percussionists in this band, aside from the drummer. And it shows. This is a pretty busy track on that end of things. Past that, I don't really care much for this song. Decide, as well as Finale, are these big, sweeping, hands-in-the-air kinds of tracks that I just do not give a single shit about. Finale specifically feels like a total waste. Like, I used Disturbed as a comparison earlier, but half of this track sounds like 10,000 Fists. Slipknot's enduring appeal at this point I think is earned, but I do disagree with it at a fundamental level. Like I said before, like it or not, this is one of the biggest metal acts on the planet, and I sure don't like it. The end so far is weak, the writing is bland, and there are some great performances that are ultimately pointless because of the production and the lack of direction that most of these tracks have. I find myself listening to this album and consistently have had the thought that everyone still involved with this project must have thought that there was something better that they could have been doing during the recording of this album. Is it a grating or particularly abrasive album? No. But is there anything fresh or exciting here? Also no. If you've been a longtime fan of Slipknot, you'll probably still be a fan after this, but I have a feeling most of these songs are not going to make it into any best of lists. Anyway, the end so far is a pretty solid 3. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of this album in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe. Check out my Instagram, my Reverb, and my Depop. Links to those are in the description below. Thank you all so much again, and we'll see you on the flip side.